Now we'll look at some lessons from the FTC complaints. Few FTC enforcement actions actually end up in court. We looked at Wyndham and LabMD, and those are rather important exceptions to the norm. Most companies settle with the FTC and accept their conditions and the 20-year oversight, which is pretty onerous when you think about it. The companies might use the 10 principles in Start with Security to really understand what the FTC might examine when they're looking at the security practices of a company. And the company itself can actually reverse that and say, well, here's the 10 things that the FTC might be looking for, so I want to make sure these are really nailed down tight. The lack of these measures might constitute unfair or deceptive trade practices in their eyes. So again, Start with Security would provide sound security principles for developing a basic security program. There's much more that you want to do in developing that strong security program, but it's a good starting point if you have no program. The FTC provides us another very good source of information as well. A lot can be learned examining the representative cases of FTC enforcement actions. The FTC kind of breaks these down into about 3 general categories: security of highly sensitive personal information, security of payment card information, security violations that contradict public policy. We'll see in later lectures where inadequate security practices by financial institutions are again challenged by the FTC and other organizations that are responsible for governing the protection of personal information inside of financial institutions. Additionally, the FTC brings actions regarding failures to protect customer privacy. So in some cases, we may find a complaint incorporates failures of security and privacy practices. So we get basically 2 different viewpoints on protecting the data. But what's sensitive information? The FTC doesn't really define sensitive information. However, they're more likely to bring action in cases where there's a failure to safeguard certain things like health condition or some other personal trait, or there's likelihood of a disclosure leading to identity theft. Maybe social security numbers or credit card numbers are stolen. The long and short of it is the FTC expects companies to adopt industry standard practices and to continue to enforce them within the company. Now, there are a number of cases in the textbook, and I want you to read all of them for several reasons. You learn something from each case, and that can help build a strong security practice when you're putting your security practice together. And they might end up on a test or quiz sometime along the course here, so that may also play in your strategy on reading those cases. Shine Practice Solutions produce software for dentist practices. Now, if you can think about lawyers, dentists, doctors, they all have software that helps manage their practice, keeps track of patients, keeps track of individuals that a lawyer may be working with, and the database engine used by Shine Practice Solutions was provided by a third party. And the database was protected the data with an insecure proprietary algorithm, and Shine partners were made aware by the third party that the algorithm did not meet industry standards. Well, they were notified by the U.S. CERT that the database was protected by a weak obfuscation algorithm. For those of you who aren't aware, a weak obfuscation algorithm is simply an algorithm that hides the data. It keeps honest people honest, but it doesn't do much to protect against a talented hacker who wants access to the data. Well, Shine partners continue to claim that the product encrypted patient data even after they were notified by U.S. CERT that that wasn't the case. So the key lesson here is if NIST or the U.S. CERT tell you that your database is not protected by strong encryption, it's not protected by strong encryption. They're experts in encryption. The FTC followed after the company did not cease its claims of encrypting patient data. In the case of the matter of Reed Elsevier and Cysent Inc., Reed Elsevier produces a product called LexisNexis. For those of you who aren't aware of what that is, it's a database that stores information that lawyers can use to look up previous cases. They can look up data about individuals they're working with. On a case, our landlords can use it, debt collectors can use it, employers use it. Stores a lot of information like credit reports, driving records, social security numbers, etc. To protect the data, the company implemented safeguards. However, there still was a breach of over 3,000 individuals, which occurred using a legitimate customer ID and password. How that customer ID and password was obtained, I don't know. It could have been by malware on the customer side. It could have been through a breach of Reed Elsevier, or it could have been simply something that was shared by a customer with somebody else. However, the thieves used the information to open credit card accounts. So despite having some precautions implemented, the FTC brought action against the company. Now, the FTC alleged the breach was caused by company failure. They used common password, or they allowed common dictionary words as passwords and user IDs. The customers could share credentials with each other. Users were not required to change passwords routinely. The number of unsuccessful attempts was not limited, and credentials were stored in cookies for customer convenience. Likewise, encryption of credentials or searches in transit were not required. Customers could create new credentials without confirming their identity. Think about that. If I log in with the customer ID and password, I could create other credentials without confirming my identity. That doesn't sound good. Company website was subject to common forms of attack. So the key lesson here is don't assume that password protection alone protects data. You must regularly assess the strength of authentication practices. And this is why we see a lot of people, as I said earlier, using things like two-factor authentication to protect access to sensitive data. Ensure that the actors cannot bypass authentication safeguards. And that's an important test that can be done by penetration testers, for instance, who are looking at your network. In the matter of Eli Lilly and Company, Eli Lilly was a manufacturer of Prozac. They offered an email service to remind patients of their medication called MediMessenger. The company decided to terminate the service and blast emailed over 669 customers. However, they put the email addresses in the to line instead of the BCC line, and consequently, everybody who got the email could see everybody else's email addresses, and therefore kind of violated the privacy of those individuals. The FTC alleged that Lilly failed to adequately train individuals handling sensitive information. Key lesson here is the FTC will hold a company liable for the actions of one employee. So it's very important that you train individuals who must handle highly sensitive data to understand what their responsibilities and their liabilities are in working with that data. And again, the FTC in this case differentiates sensitive from non-sensitive information, but again held Lilly responsible for the fact that they had released that information to a large number of individuals. The second focus of the FTC is a failure to secure payment card data. There are many cases of breaches over the last decade. There's a plethora of cases to look at of failure to secure payment card data. Even with the advent of the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, the PCI DSS as it's known, breaches continue to occur. There's been some very notable cases lately, Target, Heartland Payment Systems, Home Depot. So why do they continue to occur? Let's look at a case. In the case of Guess, they had an e-commerce site which was compromised by a SQL injection attack. Now this case was in 2003. By then SQL injection was several years old. But that's something you ought to look at. Look at SQL injection because it's still a successful attack today, and it's roughly on its, 20th year, give or take? Maybe more. I'd have to go back and look at when the first one actually occurred. Hackers were able to access customer credit card information. The FTC cited that Guess stored credit card data in the clear, unencrypted, and in readable text. This was against their company policy, but they did it anyway. They alleged the company failed to detect reasonably foreseeable vulnerabilities in their website and their application. They also failed to prevent visitors to the website from exploiting those vulnerabilities. Now, there are very simple tests to test an application, particularly a web-based application, on whether or not it can be subjected to various types of injection attacks. And so it's that testing that wasn't done by Guess and should have been done to prevent this. So the key lesson is any claims of adhering to PCI DSS standards must be strictly followed, and that includes being able to secure your applications in the way they access sensitive data. In the matter of Petco Animal Supplies in 2004, Petco Animal Supplies operated Petco.com, which had direct sales to customers. The privacy policy stated that entering credit data was completely safe and encrypted. In 2003, a hacker used SQL injection again to obtain complete credit card information. The FTC determined that Petco did not encrypt the data in transmission to their servers. Did encrypt the data in transmission to their servers, but it was subsequently stored in clear text. The FTC alleged that Petco did not implement reasonable and appropriate measures to protect personal information against unauthorized access. So the important thing here is to remember you have to protect credit card data in both transmission, in processing, and at rest in storage. And that's the key lesson that the text highlighted. In the matter of Dave & Buster's, the facts were that Dave & Buster operated 50 indoor entertainment centers nationwide. They experienced a breach of 130,000 customer payment card numbers. Hackers installed unauthorized software on the company networks, which enabled them to capture card data as it was being sent to the card processing service provider. So when a company like Dave & Buster's takes a credit card, that data is stored, and then at night it's sent up to the credit card processor, whoever that might be, and that company is responsible for notifying the various banks and etc. and helping to get the money back to Dave & Buster's, and at the same time crediting the card account of the individual who made the payment. So again, the FTC alleged that Dave & Buster's failed to adequately detect unauthorized access to their networks and to monitor third-party access. So the key lesson here is companies should routinely audit their systems to ensure no unauthorized software has been installed by a third party. And there's some very good security tools for doing this, including whitelisting of applications that can run on your network.